Want that. Special delivery. I need that. Special delivery. Welcome to the Special Delivery Podcast. I'm your host, Special, and on this show, I do one of two things. Either I'm highlighting brand new music that's dropped, or I'm sitting down with artists to break down their latest project, and that's what we're doing on this episode. I sat down with Nicolay and the Hot at Nights for a hilarious and fun conversation about their latest incredible instrumental album called Glaciers. It was hilarious because it's four guys and one microphone just passing it around, making jokes, continuously introducing themselves because my mic kind of looks like a Bob Barker style microphone. So just having a great time. But we talked all about the project, including the title, the artwork, their favorite songs, and the crazy story about how they started this project over 5 years ago and then a hard drive crashed, and just the process in remaking things and only having certain parts. Just such a good story for anybody who creates anything, and just kind of that resilience. So let's hop into it. You guys want to introduce yourselves to the people?
What's going on? My name is Nicolay.
Hi, I'm Matt Douglas.
Hi, I'm Nick Baglio.
I'm Chris Berner.
Yay! I'm so happy to have you guys here. We got to talk all about Glaciers. Absolutely incredible. Got to start with the basics. How did you guys come up with the title?
Well, the title is actually kind of a play on the fact that it took us like ages to finish the record. We started the record, I think, sometime in 2012, 2013, and just because of a number of reasons, it just took us a while to really finish it. The biggest reason was a hard drive crash in which we lost kind of most of it, and so then we had to really motivate ourselves to kind of retry it, if you will. So the Glaciers part is kind of directly a pun on the fact that it took forever to finish it, but also that we noticed they were starting to kind of melt, the tracks, if you will. So we had to finally set them free for the people.
I love that so much. And then when it comes to the artwork for it, the artwork is freaking gorgeous.
Thank you.
Where did that idea come from?
I'd love to claim credit for it, but really I just found this one photo of the astronaut in the landscape, and it really kind of spoke to me instantly because he's out of his element kind of, and so it's a play on the fact that our music is kind of spacey, kind of ambient. The Glaciers element is kind of represented in it, and so we kind of built on that vibe of the astronaut kind of out of his element, symbolizing, I guess, a little bit about how we approach music, how we approach kind of playing together.
Mm-hmm. And then you guys all have such important roles on this project. I think I'd like each of you to go around and say what your favorite song is. Mine personally is Pioneer 11, so we'll talk about that one. But each of you just talk about your favorite song and why that's your favorite on this project.
I would have to say mine would be Saturn.
Yes.
Just from a standpoint that I get to play the most notes on that song. So from a note quota standpoint, it's excellent. No, I like it because it's sort of a reachable, what's that word, where it's very
Attainable.
But that's not the one I'm looking for, though. But that's the right, I don't know, it's for a song that's odd meter, it doesn't feel that way. Accessible is the word.
See? Yes.
Yeah. So where it's like, oh, I don't even know what that is, but sure, that would be my favorite. Hopefully you can edit the living shit out of that and what I just said here.
But I love the teamwork part of it. You know what I mean? Like, you guys have been working together for so long, touring together for so long, that it's like you guys are able to help each other out with words.
It's hard for me to say I have a favorite. I mean, I like Of Days Gone By a whole lot because it's just kind of relaxing and takes its time, and you know, there's different sort of levels of patience in these songs, you know, and that's one that really has a lot of emotion to it to me. I mean, some people might call it boring, but I don't. I really love all of it. I mean, we spent a good bit of time on this record, and it came together in the end. It just sort of, after we finished it was like, wow, this is done, and kind of like it, you know. So yeah. Matthew?
I'm terrible with the titles. Is the Of Days Gone By, is that the da-da-dee-da-da-da-da? What's that one?
That's your favorite?
Yeah.
All right, that's Tell Me Something New.
Well, that's Tell Me Something New, right. I would say that my favorite is Tell Me Something New.
Oh.
And I just really like the melody to it. But I also like, as a sax player on it, that when we play it live, we sort of, it kind of goes at the end a little bit. I'm kind of improvising towards the end, and I never completely understand what key I'm playing in when we play it, and I like that. I sort of like that about this band in general. I feel like there are a lot of songs where I'm playing and I don't really understand what key we're playing in, and I could ask because somebody would know, but it's more fun to not know, and then just kind of like feels a little bit more free, natural that way.
I think my favorite is Now the Coast is Clear, because like that's what we came out with initially. It was kind of the opening salvo, if you will, of what we were doing, and it really connected with people. You know, I'm just really proud of how that one came out specifically. As I said before, some of these tracks have been 4 or 5 years in the making, and it's easy to kind of lose interest in music when it takes so long. But like sometime last year, we kind of really found sort of the sweet spot again where we got re-excited about it. And that track, I think, sort of kicked everything off for us. It was the first track that we finished mixing and mastering and put out as a single. And I think to this day, that one is really special to me.
Makes sense. I love Pioneer 11 because it feels like a jam session. I watched the Warehouse Live video that you guys did, and it just really gives off that jam session vibe. But at the same time, there's these spacey elements to it, to where it's like, oh shit, we're in space, this is dope. What was it like making that one particularly?
Oh, it's I think of all the tracks, that one I think was the most sort of collaborative of all of us. I think we ended up kind of writing it together. Everybody, it was really a track that was kind of built up in stages, and everybody literally put their own touch on it. And so I think that was definitely one of the more collaborative ones, and it's just interesting to see the progression of that one specifically. It started out as a pretty cool idea. It was really the guys turned it into just they really kind of took it to another level. So it's a very good, I think, example of what the added value is of the four of us together, kind of the sum being bigger than the parts sort of thing.
Definitely. And then when it comes to the cohesiveness of this project, and I even read on like the Foreign Exchange's website about how you want to kind of ride to this, get in a car and ride to it. And I personally just love instrumental projects, period, because you get to take this journey, and, you know, whether you're doing work or riding in a car or just being able to dedicate that mind space to this journey that you're taking along with these musicians. What about riding in a car kind of spoke to this project for you guys to kind of put that in basically the biography of the project?
I think for myself, I've always kind of looked at the music that I do as something that I associate with moving things. I think especially a lot of the tracks on this project really kind of have sort of that flux in them. And I think especially when it comes to instrumental music, which it can be a tough pill to swallow for some people, we really felt that the album, and the fact that the album is instrumental is one of its stronger points. We really spend a lot of time on melody, on the arrangements, on hooks, on just making sure that everything was in its right place. And I think it's an album that you can enjoy in a number of ways. But to myself, like I said, I love listening to that album, for instance, in an airplane, or it's just, it gives you that sort of sense of going somewhere, you know?
No, that's super felt. It's a very interesting point. And just all of your music in general, like there is a movement to it. So it's cool to really just take on that movement. I love that so much. And then, was there a song that was easiest to make on this one?
Easiest. It's interesting. The way this project started, and we didn't really talk about that, is Nicolay essentially sent me a pile of demos that were basically, I don't know if they were Foreign Exchange rejects or they were just stuff that might have been a little bit outside of the Foreign Exchange lane. Yeah. And we went through them and I guess sort of picked out ones that we really liked, or ones that I liked. And we first started by having the stems of these tracks broken up, and Nick Baglio and I stepped into the recording studio and put new live drums on all of it. And that's sort of where it started. So we didn't know what was going to happen with this stuff, and it all evolved tremendously after that. But I don't know. I think beyond that, there was one of the songs was a demo of mine that called The Current that made it, and that one felt pretty easy because I sent it to Nicolay, and then he put some keyboards on it, and it wasn't a whole lot of rearranging or anything that happened with that one. Some of them, it took a little more work where we had to add extra sections to, like Saturn, and the iterations of these where some of them had wildly different drums on them to start off with, and we just sort of, some things we had to simplify a whole lot. And some of it we started recording in 2013, I think, and then some of the drum parts are from 2018. Earlier this year we were adding drums to some of these songs. So it's definitely over 5 years, different. Some of the guitar solos might be from 2018, some from way back then. So, and the record, it lived in Nicolay's studio, it lived in Nick Baglia's studio, in my studio, in Matt Douglas's studio, and externally in some other commercial facilities. So saw a lot of different rooms,
No, but that's super cool because you don't want it to feel like it's just Nicolay featuring the Hotter Nights, or it's the Hotter Nights featuring Nicolay. Like, for it to live in all these different studios and to come together, like, that really gives ownership to it, that it's like, nope, this is a little bit of everybody.
Yeah.
So that's super
and
cool.
It's different than our previous release was the Shibuya Session EP, and that was literally us four in the studio playing live. We went into this new record with the intention of making a studio album, and exploiting the advantages of the studio as it pertains to that, and that's what we got. And it's a wildly different thing.
Anybody else have an easiest?
Yeah, I mean, everything's pretty easy for me, but it is pretty amazing on the. I wouldn't say our lives have been super easy since we started the record. I mean, just in the fact that because the Hot Nights also put out a record last year called 3 Kids. I think when we first started making the Glaciers record, you said 2013, right? So it was before all any of us had kids.
Yeah.
And I've had 3 kids since, and Chris has had one as well.
And I am a kid.
And Nicolay is a large child. Tall, very slender, but tall. Yeah, huge baby in track pants. He's a 7-foot baby in track pants. So it's kind of interesting to think about like which one was easiest, and then to think back on like the last 5 years of our lives and be like, man, I don't know. Either none of it was easy, or that was the easiest thing that could have happened to any of us was making this record compared to what the rest of our life was like. So I think about that conceptually in a very fond way. Nick Bagley.
Thanks, Matt. I wouldn't say that any of them were easy. What I thought was interesting, because, I mean, this is the only time this has happened to me where, because the process when we started was so long ago, that for a second, I wasn't even sure that anything would even happen with it. Like that this could all go in the trash and it was just more of a memory than anything. But thankfully, because of the hard drive crash and getting everybody back up and running. But I think listening back to that stuff 4 years after it happened, it was all very like, oh, that's right. It went like this. And so you had like a fresh set of ears on it, which I think when you make a record, usually it's just go, 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 and then it's done, and you're sick of it, and then you go play it live all over the place. But for this, I thought it was cool, and like Chris had said about the process of making the music, where it came back around, and it was sort of like, oh, well, maybe the way that you heard it this time around was different than even like your headspace and your playing, like for me, it was hard to listen to some of the things that I chose to play just personally 4 or 5 years ago, would maybe a choice that I wouldn't make now. But I'll say that, I think every musician will always go back and be like, for better or for worse. So this has nothing to do with that question at all. Total tangent. But
I love the insight, though.
But yeah, it's just a very weird thing.
I think none of it was easy, but at the same time, all of it felt easy in the sense that the collaboration was very natural. I think the hardest part was just, once it was kind of down in the dumps for a little bit, I think the hardest part was kind of getting out of that motivation, finding that. But I think, like Nick earlier said, I think once we listened to the material, couple of years after the fact, and we just realized, like, wow, this is actually really great. And at the same time, I think some of the most dramatic moments probably came at the end when it comes to certain performances, certain kind of special sauces that we put over top. So it really, I think, was the most sort of fraught album, the most sort of labored album that I've ever made. I mean, mostly I'm the captain of my own ship, and I don't have to sort of even think about dealing with other people contributing or making calls. And I think the most refreshing part of this was going back and forth with Chris, trying to really get these things to be the absolute best that we could. Some of the final mixes were number like 20, 21, 30 in, like literally small changes, big changes. We really wanted to do the album justice sonically and spend whatever time we could find to do it right. And so I think it's really an album that is very satisfactory for me to look back on, just because I know that no stone was left unturned. Normally when I release an album like a month in, I'm like, ooh, you hear what you could have done better. In this instance, like literally every single note, every hi-hat, every bass line, it's exactly where we wanted it to be, and that's an incredibly gratifying feeling for me. Definitely kind of a new experience, and I think one of the reasons that I love the project so much is just the pure heart and soul. There's a lot of passion in it, and I think you hear that in the record.
Just such an interesting and cool journey, because I just love the idea of creative processes, and that's a whole different creative process, to have something, to lose it and look back on it and be like, oh, okay, this is how we can do it differently. It's just super, super interesting. And even how you're saying, like, when you hear the old stuff again, like, even me as a listener, I'll listen to Spotify, and if they, try to gauge your memory with songs, and they'll play songs from like 5-6 years ago, and the minute it hits, you're like, oh wow, I remember this. So to do that as an actual musician, to hear something you did a while ago, I'm like, oh wow, I remember this, and not only do I remember it, but I can enhance it and have a second try at it. It's a super, super cool process. And you guys talked about how melody was a big part of it, also making a commercial album, and I also know that a big part of it was songwriting. You guys really wanted to make songs. What was it like creating that and kind of coming to each other with that idea and saying, hey, last time we were live, it was incredible, but let's really focus in on songwriting, melody, and a commercial album? I
distinctly remember talking to Chris and explaining to him that I really wanted to do something that kind of what Chick Corea was trying to do with Return to Forever albums, where he wanted to make a jazz album that would have a broad appeal to people, and to whatever extent they would really kind of focus in and tailor the music to be not just highbrow or elite or something like that, but truly something that a lot of people could enjoy. And I think we really wanted to do that. We didn't want to make a critical darling or anything. We really wanted to make something that people would enjoy. And I think the songs are a big part of that. I think it's one thing if somebody is a really great musician, but I think ultimately it's the songs that will take it over the top. And so I think a lot of the melodies, a lot of the arrangement, a lot of the movement in them, everything was super deliberate just to make something that I think a large variety of people can enjoy.
Did you guys have anything you wanted to add to that?
Chris Berner.
The songs, like I said, most of them came in an incomplete form, so we got a chance to build on a lot of Nicolay's ideas. Like, I remember Matt and I would sit in Matt's studio and just kind of hammering out melodies on the piano, and he's, we're trying to sort of figure out what's going to fit here, in this part of the song. So it's like an interesting songwriting process, because, a lot of times you might have a melody first, where this was I don't know that in our case, at least, the melody never existed first. And there were some of these already had like the final drum take on them. And so Nick is tracking drums without not knowing the melody sometimes. And, so it was sort of like a really piecemeal process. And then we'd have to go back and change the drums, later to kind of suit the section or whatever. Very different from any record I've ever made.
Yeah. Almost like a musical exercise.
Totally.
I've heard people talk about getting stems before and kind of just from a rapper's and like a producer's perspective, just trying to piece that together and it not matching up correctly, but like to do it with all these different instruments and like you said, without the melody sometimes and stuff like that, like it just really sounds like musician exercise.
I met Douglas here. Being a saxophone player, but also all of us being saxophonists, yes. I like improvising when we play our shows live, and I feel like we maintain the character of all of the songs that we're playing live, mostly thanks to Chris and Nicolay for having designed the stage show to be so representative of the record in a really great way. But I'm not super interested in improvising a ton. In the process of making the record, I wasn't super interested in like blowing a bunch of solos over it, and I feel like that's just my taste over the last few years has been more about interesting songs, interesting textures, kind of depth of field in the sound and melody. But I'm not really particularly interested in hearing a bunch of long-winded solos, certainly not for myself, But I think that's what makes a live show fun, right? It's fun to, let loose, and it's exciting, and people are in the moment so they can experience the moment with you. But on the record, I feel like, it's a little bit more of a fat-trimmed experience, and I personally like that part of it, that there's just less improvisation.
It's Chris Berner here. Slight tangent, but very much related, and this might be a curveball for you, but the Hot at Nights a year ago released a new record called 3 Kids, and it was very much a similarly made record. We set out, previously the Hot at Nights had done all live albums. I mean, our 3 previous releases were us playing live in the studio, and this is the same process where we wrote a bunch of songs and had demos, and then Matt and Nick came in and just replaced all the parts, and we made adjustments, and it was much more kind of synth and electronic based. And on this tour that we're on currently, we're playing a bunch of that music as well, because it kind of works really well with the Glaciers project. It really does. It's a little bit of a different flavor, but it kind of gives it a nice variety in the show. So I guess we're just really into studio records this go round. Who knows what'll happen next?
As far as the theme and the cohesiveness and even the song titles, what was that process like?
Well, the song titles, I wish that I could tell you that it's just a deep sort of like meaning thing, and it is. No, I'm kidding. Normally, when I first started out, like my song titles were like track 1 or like track 3B or like track 4, a little different, like stuff like just real kind of, and at some point I started really giving demos a name, something that would just come to me. And it's interesting because over time that has become more of a thing. Even in the foreign exchange where I'll work with my partner Fonte, at some point he started taking those demo names and taking them seriously. I'd never really intended for them to, but he would somehow get informed in his ideas by the title that I chose. So really they can be, they more represent a feeling than anything. They're not necessarily philosophically like super intense. Like a Pioneer 11 and then Saturn are kind of brother and sister on the album. And Pioneer 11 was actually a satellite that was launched in the 70s, I think, to map Saturn and all its moons. So that's kind of where that came from. Some of them are directly referencing certain things and others are just utter bogus. I'll take credit for all of it. It's sheer brilliance. It just comes. I don't know how I come up with it.
Anything else you guys want to say about Glaciers?
Go out and buy it, right?
Yes.
Go out and buy it.
Yeah.
It's Nick Baglio.
Yeah, please buy it and please look for us out on the road. Come out and hear us. And the live show is, we're taking the record and taking it a little further. It's been a lot of fun. Matt Douglas?
I'd just like to say we should take care of our environment because those glaciers, as important as they are to us, they are going away. Yeah. So I'd like to shout out to the environment.
Well, thank you for having us. As always, that's the main thing, right? Thank you. Thank you for inviting us. And thank you, California, for being just a down-ass, cool-ass state. That's really what it is, right? I mean, we traveled the country extensively, and I always tell people the city that I'm in is my favorite city because that's what you do. And I'm lying 90% of the time, just straight lying. But in California, I don't have to lie. I love it out here. Climate reminds me a little bit of home. You know, it's got that North Sea climate. Yeah, I'm getting that a little bit over here, which the North Sea I don't think is anywhere close to here, but it somehow works out. There's more where that came from. Catch us next time on iHeartRadio. Nicolay.
Matt, Chris,
Nick.
And we are Nicolay and the Hot Nights. Thank you. iHeartRadio 2018.
She did not ask for any of that. No.
I think she.
But I wanted it.
I think she did. I think she was asking for it.
Yeah, it was like an unspoken
best part.
thing that like I wanted, and yeah.
And I'm not a native speaker, so I gotta.
very frustrating.
I gotta translate.
Utter bogus.
Utter bogus.
I gotta.
That's the follow-up.
I gotta do my Rosetta Stone when I speak this English. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That was fun. That was fun.
Thanks again to Nicolay and the Hot at Nights for coming by. That was so much fun. And thank you so much for checking it out. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that follow or subscribe button on whatever you're listening on. And then reach out to me. Let me know what your favorite part was. Say hi or anything like that. I'm on Twitter at SpecialSays, and on Instagram it's at SpecialSays as well. Plus, I'm coming out with a new project. It's going to be a whole month-long project starting December 1st. So you might just want to check that out. As always, this episode is dedicated to Marlon. Do what you can to stop senseless acts of gun violence.